Not a bad first experience here. How are you enjoying yourself?
Kamusta tayo ngayon, Toronto? Huwag niyo nga yung mga bandila niyo,
48 hours earlier, Alex Eala stood in Washington, holding the biggest trophy of her career. She had just become the first Filipino ever to win a WTA Tour singles title, completing one of the most remarkable weeks the sport had seen all season. She defeated an Olympic gold medalist, a defending champion, a top 10 star, and a 4-time Grand Slam champion to lift the biggest trophy of her young career. By the time she landed in Toronto, the conversation had already changed. People weren't asking whether she would play. They were asking whether there were any tickets left. That isn't how first-round matches are supposed to work. Not at a WTA 1000 event, not on a weekday night, and certainly not for a 21-year-old who had only just broken into the world's top 20. Yet that's exactly what happened. Long before Alex stepped onto SoBi Stadium, reports began circulating that the Wednesday night session had completely sold out. Tournament organizers had seen unusually high demand almost immediately after the draw was released. Fans weren't simply buying tickets to watch tennis. They were buying tickets because Alex Eala was playing. Only a week earlier, Washington had introduced her to the wider tennis world. Toronto was showing what happened next. This wasn't curiosity anymore, it was expectation. The timing made it even more extraordinary. Most players spend days, sometimes weeks, celebrating the biggest title of their careers. Alex barely had time to catch her breath. She finished a rain-delayed final on Monday, completed media commitments, packed her bags, boarded a flight to Canada, adjusted to a new tournament, practiced on unfamiliar courts, and prepared for another completely different opponent. Professional tennis rarely allows anyone to enjoy yesterday's success. The calendar moves too quickly. 1 week, you're lifting a trophy. The next week, you're expected to prove it wasn't the peak. Toronto also provided the perfect stage for that test. The Greater Toronto area is home to one of the largest Filipino communities outside the Philippines. As word spread that the newly crowned Washington champion would make her Canadian debut, Philippine flags began appearing around the tournament grounds before she had even struck a competitive ball. The atmosphere felt strangely familiar. Fans waited outside practice courts, children carried homemade signs, families traveled across Ontario, just for the chance to watch history continue, what Washington had started. Toronto was ready to amplify. The attention wasn't built only on one title. It was built on what that title represented. For months, Alex had been climbing steadily through the rankings, collecting victories over some of the biggest names in women's tennis. Washington transformed that progress into something visible. Suddenly, casual fans knew her name. Broadcasters wanted her matches. Tournament sessions featuring Alex Eala became events. Rather than ordinary first-round encounters, that kind of attention creates a different kind of pressure. When nobody expects you to win, every victory feels like a bonus. When an entire stadium arrives because of you, every match becomes an examination. Waiting across the net was Alycia Parks. Months earlier, Parks had exposed one of the biggest weaknesses in Alex's game at the Australian Open. Her explosive serve and relentless first-strike tennis had overwhelmed the Filipina after a promising start. It wasn't a defeat people talked about for long, but Alex never forgot it. Now they met again. This time, the circumstances were completely different. The rankings had changed. The confidence had changed. The expectations had changed. Thousands of people had come because they believed the Washington champion was about to begin another memorable run. Selling tickets had become easy. Winning the next match would be much harder. The hardest match to win in tennis is not always against the highest-ranked opponent. Sometimes, it's the one that comes immediately after the biggest week of your life. Winning a title changes more than your ranking. It changes the way people look at you. Opponents study you more carefully. The media expects another headline. Fans expect another celebration. Every success raises the standard for the next match. That was the challenge waiting for Alex Eala in Toronto. Washington had turned her into one of the biggest stories in world tennis almost overnight. The trophy was still fresh. The interviews were still circulating across social media. Her ranking had climbed into the world's top 20 for the first time. Everywhere she walked around the tournament grounds, cameras followed. Supporters lined the practice courts. Every autograph session lasted longer than expected. The excitement was understandable. The pressure was unavoidable. Across the net stood Alycia Parks, a player capable of ending points before most rallies even had the chance to begin. Parks doesn't build victories through patience. She builds them through force. Her serve is among the fastest on the WTA Tour. regularly exceeding 120 miles per hour, when it lands consistently. Opponents often spend entire matches reacting instead of creating. The first strike comes quickly. The second strike is even heavier. Before long, the point is already over. Earlier in the season, Alex had experienced exactly what that felt like. Their meeting at the Australian Open ended in disappointment. Parks gradually imposed her power, dictated the tempo of the match, and prevented Alex from settling into the rhythm she prefers. It wasn't simply a defeat, it exposed a problem that needed solving. 7 months later, the rematch looked completely different. Not because Parks had become a weaker player, because Alex had become a smarter one. The biggest improvement wasn't hidden in a new forehand or a faster serve. It appeared in the decisions she made before each rally even began. Instead of waiting behind the baseline, Alex stepped forward on the return. Every step inside the court stole valuable fractions of a second from Parks. Those fractions matter against players who depend on overwhelming pace. By meeting the ball earlier, Alex refused to give Parks the comfortable rhythm that had carried her through their first meeting. It sounds like a small adjustment. In reality, it changed the entire geometry of the match. Parks wanted quick points. Alex kept forcing one extra shot. Parks wanted to control the first strike. Alex kept taking that control away. The second serve became another battleground. Months earlier, Parks had been able to begin too many rallies on her own terms. This time, every vulnerable second serve became an invitation. Alex attacked with conviction, immediately applying pressure instead of simply putting the return back into play. The result wasn't spectacular winners flying off the racket every few points. It was something far more damaging. Parks was never allowed to feel comfortable. Every service game demanded work. Every second serve carried uncertainty. And uncertainty is dangerous for players whose game depends on confidence. What stood out most wasn't the shot-making, it was the patience. Earlier in her career, Alex sometimes tried to solve powerful opponents by matching their aggression. Against Parks in Toronto, she chose a different path. She absorbed the pace instead of fighting it. She redirected the ball into uncomfortable areas. She trusted her movement to extend rallies just long enough for opportunities to appear naturally. That is the difference between reacting to an opponent's strengths and forcing an opponent to deal with yours. As the match unfolded, the crowd sensed the shift. They had filled the stadium because they believed the Washington champion could continue her remarkable run. Alex never asked them to carry her. She didn't need emotional miracles or impossible comebacks. She rewarded their belief by giving them exactly what they had come to see. Another performance built on clarity, discipline, and complete conviction. Every successful return generated another wave of noise. Every hold of serve increased the anticipation. Every break of serve convinced more people that Washington had not been an extraordinary week isolated from the rest of her season. It had become the new standard. By the time Alex walked to the net after another composed victory, the cheers were celebrating more than another place in the draw. They were celebrating confirmation. Washington made people curious. Toronto gave them another reason to believe. The victory over Alycia Parks wasn't the biggest win of Alex Eala's career. Washington will always hold that distinction, but in many ways, Toronto answered a more difficult question. Winning a breakthrough title is one challenge. Showing that your level hasn't disappeared a few days later is another entirely. Professional tennis has seen countless players produce one unforgettable week. Before quietly slipping back into the pack, momentum fades, confidence disappears. The spotlight moves on to someone else. That's why the first tournament after a career-defining victory is often the hardest one to navigate. Every player arrives with expectations they didn't have before. Every opponent arrives with a detailed scouting report. Every tournament suddenly sees your name differently. That's exactly where Alex Eala finds herself now. Washington changed far more than her ranking. It changed her position within the sport. Tournament organizers now understand that matches involving Alex Eala attract attention. Sessions featuring her generate demand. Media outlets are placing her at the center of their coverage, rather than introducing her as an emerging player. Her matches are no longer hidden on outside courts. They have become some of the tournament's biggest attractions. The crowds have changed too. People are no longer discovering Alex for the first time. They're returning because they expect something memorable to happen whenever she steps onto the court. That expectation brings excitement. It also brings pressure. Opponents feel it as well. Only a few months ago, seeded players looked at Alex Eala as an uncomfortable outsider capable of causing an upset. Now, the conversation is different. She's no longer the surprise. She's becoming one of the players everyone studies before the tournament even begins. Coaches prepare specific game plans. Players spend more time reviewing her patterns. They know her aggressive returning can disrupt powerful servers. They know she takes the ball earlier than most players on tour. They know she rarely panics when momentum shifts against her. Most importantly, they know she has developed the confidence to trust her own game. Regardless of who stands across the net, that changes every matchup. Alex is no longer chasing the elite. The elite are beginning to prepare for Alex. That's why the Parks victory carries so much significance. Not because Alycia Parks is the highest-ranked opponent Alex has defeated. Not because it added another impressive name to her growing list of victories. It matters because of when it happened. The first match after the biggest week of your career is often the easiest one to lose. You're emotionally drained. You've spent days answering questions about your breakthrough. You've traveled to another city. You've changed courts, conditions, and opponents almost overnight. One part of your mind is still celebrating, while another has to compete again. Many great weeks end exactly there. Alex refused to let hers end. Instead of carrying Washington like a burden, she carried it like experience, instead of playing as though she had something to protect. She played as though she still had something to prove. That mindset may become even more valuable than the ranking points she earned, because the road ahead only becomes more demanding. Every round brings another accomplished opponent. Every victory raises expectations another level. Every tournament now begins with more cameras, more headlines, and more people wondering whether Alex Eala can keep this remarkable rise alive. Washington created those expectations. Toronto proved she could carry them, and that may be the biggest lesson of all. The next opponents won't simply be preparing for Alex Eala's forehand, her return game, or her movement around the court. They'll be preparing for a player who now walks onto the court with an entire stadium expecting her to win. That is a completely different kind of challenge. So far, she has handled it remarkably well. If you enjoyed this breakdown, let us know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Toronto proved Alex Eala's Washington triumph was the beginning of something even bigger? Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next documentary as Alex continues her Canadian Open journey.